Good Wednesday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports for CLE. Thanks for joining us. Browns back in Berea on the practice field, getting ready for the game in Baltimore against the Ravens on Sunday. Not all of the Browns, though, were on the practice field. DeJuan Jones, right tackle, not practicing. Greg Newsome, David Njoku, Pierre Strong, Marquise Goodwin still in the concussion protocol, and David Bell, all no-goes as far as that goes. So the Browns also put Jedrick Wills on injured reserve yesterday to go along with Jack Conklin. So the Browns' two starting tackles from the beginning of the year, both on injured reserve. DeJuan Jones not practicing. Kevin Stefanski on the plan for left and right guard this week.
We have options. We're going to work through all those options this week.
What are the options?
The tackles on our roster.
What's the short-term plan, though? I see DeJuan is out today.
Mm-hmm.
James said he was going to go and work at right side.
Yeah, we're working through all of our options. James certainly has played on both sides, so we'll work through those both through walkthrough and practice today.
With DeJuan, do you know if is he going to be available Sunday?
Don't know. Yeah, not going to practice today.
How hard is it, I guess, the two backups on your roster are new? So how hard, what kind of a challenge is that getting those guys ready?
Yeah, that's, coaches work around the clock to get new players ready. I think of, Prochet got here and was thrust into the game, not just as a returner, as a receiver in this last game. So that's what you have to do as coaches, get some new guys ready to play. That's what we'll do if need be.
With that, let's welcome in Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus, NFL, and draft analyst, also co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. Trevor, the guys that are likely to be starters, or the backups at least, maybe one starter, wasn't on the practice squad for the Browns even at the beginning of the season. And you're facing a defense in the Ravens that's a lot like the defense of the Browns. They get after it.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. This is not a good time. If there's ever a good time for starting offensive linemen to go down, this is not a great one. You're going up against a divisional opponent, one that beat you pretty good. Now, I know they didn't have Deshaun Watson in that one, but beat you pretty good earlier in the season. You want to make sure that you even things up there. You want to stay ahead in the win column because this division, this conference, it's tight. It's going to be tight all the way till when we get to the beginning round of the playoffs. And so, yeah, I mean, Kevin Stefanski didn't have a ton of answers there, and obviously it's hard to speculate exactly what they are going to do because there's a lot of teams, even going back to before the trade deadline. There's fans who go, well, why don't we trade for an offensive lineman? And every coach, every GM will tell you the same thing. If there's a good offensive lineman around the league, they're not available because of things like what we're seeing with Cleveland, where when you lose one, it can sometimes be really detrimental, let alone losing two of them.
Yeah, and potentially a third with DeJuan Jones. DeJuan Jones has become a guy you don't really question, and that was a fourth-round pick in the draft.
Yeah, no, they're very lucky to have gotten DeJuan Jones, and he was somebody who his tape spelled out a player who should have been drafted much higher than the fourth round. I wonder what the process was like for him. The interview process, the Senior Bowl process, when he was meeting coaches, because I just don't really understand. It doesn't really make sense. The tape was good at Ohio State. His performance at the Senior Bowl, albeit one day, was dominant, and he doesn't go until day 3. Now, obviously, the Browns are capitalizing on that in a big way because they need somebody who had that kind of tape and that kind of starting ability, and thankfully, he is there for them now.
All right, Deshaun Watson also spoke to the media. He talked about his chemistry with Amari Cooper, and if he views this game with the Ravens as kind of a duel with Lamar Jackson, the Ravens quarterback.
I don't play against Lamar. I play against the Ravens defense. So I can't focus on, what Lamar is doing on the opposite side and trying to do that. I got to focus on, attacking this defense because if I get worried about, another quarterback, then, I'm not going to play well against the defense. So I got to focus on, the two linebackers and the edge rushers and the secondary and what they want to try to present with us. So that's my main focus is the Ravens defense, and that's what I'm going to be locked in on.
Deshaun, after the game, you said you weren't particularly happy about 19 out of 30, and a lot of those incompletions were on shorter passes. What do you think's going on with the shorter passes?
Just
a matter of touch, getting that back, or what?
No, I mean, it's nothing about getting anything back. It's just connecting with the guys. That's pretty much it.
Deshaun, what do you appreciate most about Amari?
The biggest thing is just his work ethic. I mean, he comes in each and every day. He puts in his own time in the film work. He puts his own time in, his body, and just getting out there and just making sure that we all on the same page, no matter who's the quarterback. So I think that's the biggest thing for me. And then he wants to, help everybody else around him, because that he's not a selfish guy. And when his opportunities come, he take advantage of them.
And Trevor, when you look at it, the chemistry between Cooper and Watson has been pretty good. They got to get somebody else seriously involved. And Njoku is flash, but there isn't, 2 or 1B or whatever you want to call them. They need some support behind Amari Cooper.
Yeah, and that was kind of what it was like going into the season, right? I think that was a big conversation. And even if you go before the draft, they end up getting Cedric Tillman, who I would like to see more of as the second half of this season goes on. But that was a big reason why we continued to mock draft wide receivers to the Browns, because it's like, all right, you got Amari. And like you said, Njoku can be a really great complementary piece, but you look around the NFL, and if you don't have 2 stud receivers, you're behind the times. It feels like you're not going to compete against some of the best offenses in the NFL. And so that feels like an area where Cleveland has tried to invest some resources in. Obviously, you bring in Elijah Moore. He still has not really recaptured that magic that he had in that first year with New York. And so he hasn't really been able to produce at that level that you maybe have wanted to. I think Tillman is still coming along as a rookie, so they're still kind of waiting for that receiving room to blossom, if you will. And maybe that is something that kind of takes hold in the second half of the season. But you're right. It's a situation where if things aren't going well with Amari, if the other team is really focusing in on him, double covering him, giving him cap coverage, whatever it is, it's hard to think that somebody else can step up in that kind of manner. And that in today's NFL puts you really behind the 8 ball.
All right, so the Browns lost to the Ravens 28-3 last time they played. That was here in Cleveland. Anthony Walker talked about what needs to change in the second game.
Not give up 28 points. Got to stop the run better. Obviously, that's how we start every week, focusing on stopping the run. Be fundamentally sound and pass rush lanes and all that. Don't let them get out the pocket and make a throw on the run. Just play overall better, team ball better.
I know we talked with you guys a lot about eye candy before you played the 49ers. Mm-hmm. Ravens did some of that too with Flowers. Like, looking back on that, how much of a teaching point did that become, and what's kind of key to combating some of that when they try it again?
Yeah, just staying focused on our keys. Don't get distracted by what teams try to do. The jet motion and all that stuff. We can't let that distract us. We got to stay fundamentally sound and locked in on our keys as linebackers and safeties, especially, and then be ready to stop the run.
And Trevor, I know there were short fields, 2 of them. I think one was at the 38, one was at the 10. But there were also 2 long drives that the Ravens put together. And you haven't seen that very often, where a team has done it 2 or 3 times in the same game, length of the field, against this defense. Yeah,
and it's hard to judge the Ravens offense versus maybe how other offenses have fared against Cleveland, because they've, even last week, they're shutting a team out. And you're just not going to do that against Baltimore. They're too good of a team. But you talk about their average or points per game average, it's somewhere around high 20s. That 28 number that they gave up last time, that's basically a season average for the Ravens right now. A successful day for Cleveland would be holding them right around 20 points. Less than 21 is really what I would shoot for. If you hold the Ravens to less than 21 points, you're giving yourself a chance to win the football game. It's getting in those high 20s, low 30s, that stuff on the scoreboard where you say, all right, offense better have an incredible day if we're really going to keep up with them, especially against a Ravens defense. So, obviously Walker is correct in a lot of his assessments. You got to be fundamentally sound up front. I know that we'll talk about that in a little bit. Of course, the pass rush has got to be on fire. I think the linebacker level's got to be really disciplined in how they play against Lamar, because Lamar is playing very, very efficient. In fact, there are ways that feels like he is more efficient this year than he was even his MVP season. That MVP year, it was more of the hype from him, the fact that nobody could stop his rushing ability. But this year, he is so efficient as a passer, despite a lot of the guys that he's throwing to not gaining that consistent separation. So, yeah, I think that is the game plan. That's what you've got to go into it with. And you can't think that you're going to hold this Baltimore team to 10 points. But anything around or less than 21, you're talking about giving yourself a chance. And I think that that's what they should shoot for.
All right, this is from ESPN's mid-season report, stat that defined the first half. The Browns have leaned on their defensive backs to hold up in man-to-man coverage. 53.6% of the time they've delivered. Cleveland, number 1 in the NFL, lowest QBR when in man, 18.2. Next closest is the Ravens, who have an opposing man QBR of 27.5. Again, the man-to-man coverage is great. The question is, what do you do with Lamar Jackson if he gets outside of contain?
Yeah, so these two teams, they have the formula to allow you to play man coverage, right? You are drafting and acquiring the corners that are comfortable playing in press man. They're comfortable playing with their back to the ball. And that is a technique. That is something that you need to hone in on. And I think both of those teams have those players. But another very integral part of playing man coverage, as much as both of these teams do, you have to win up front. You have to be able to get to the quarterback. You have to be able to get after the quarterback quickly. And these are also two of the best teams in the NFL at doing that. So it makes total sense that both of these teams are very aggressive in their man coverage, but they're also successful in their man coverage. When it comes to Lamar, I think this has to be a big Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah game. Like, that is a major key matchup for me in this one, because the snap count's been a little up and down over the last couple of weeks, but he's having a really good year whenever he has been out there. And it's his speed that you need that out there on the field. And I talked about those linebackers got to be really disciplined in what they're doing. Lamar is not this run first or even first read, I'm going to take off type of a quarterback that he might have been at the very beginning of his career. He is somebody who runs when it is most advantageous and most efficient. But still, when the guys are covered, and I mentioned how the Ravens wide receivers have struggled at times this year really separating, he will take off and run with it. But that's where those speedy linebackers need to be ready to take him down. No missed tackles in this one. You got to keep those missed tackles very, very low, and that's how you contain him.
All right, before we go to break, let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason for the first time today.
With our defense playing as good and as well as it has all season, should we be concerned that Coach Schwartz might be considered for a head coaching job? Do you think he wants to head coach again, or do you think he wants to help bring a championship to Cleveland? Thanks for taking my call.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Trevor, that's an interesting question. I'm not sure. The honest answer is, initially I didn't think he would want to be a head coach. He has a way of building, he's built a culture on defense that is very desirable.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And, to answer the initial part of, or actually the latter part of the caller's question, I think he wants to bring a championship to Cleveland, but he probably wants to do it this year because that's going to be something that's going to help his head coach candidacy. And, it's not for everybody being a head coach, but he has been a head coach before. And I think that probably the way that it ended, he doesn't want to go out like that as a head coach. And if he has the right opportunity that comes along, he really might take it, especially since this year we're seeing defensive coordinators kind of figure things out against some of the best offensive coordinators in the game. So I know that over the last couple of head coaching cycles, it's all about, okay, how do we get this hot new offensive coordinator in to help the quarterback, help the offense, all that good stuff. And I still think there are plenty of guys who are going to get head coaching gigs that are of that mold. But with defenses punching back a little bit here, you will find a couple of teams this upcoming head coaching cycle that will want to gravitate towards that more old school, that defensive philosophy, especially at the head coach spot. And so I think for as good of a year as Schwartz is having, his name is going to be near the top of that list with consideration in interviews.
Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we will continue talking Browns. How important is this upcoming game against the Ravens for Deshaun Watson? Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
This is the 50, 100, 500 scratch-off from the Ohio Lottery, a much cleaner way of winning. We precision-crafted 3 perfect increments of cash, $50, $100, and $500, and created the only game that pays exclusively in those increments, hence the clever name. 50, 100, 500. Ideal quantities for dining foods, clothing wear, or stereophonics. The simplicity is breathtaking. Play 50, 100, 500, and transform how you feel about winning.
We continue talking Browns with Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus, co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. Kyle Brandt from NFL Network's Good Morning Football. Just how important the Ravens game, not only for the Browns, but for Deshaun Watson.
It is time now. Show up in Cleveland last year, very bizarre season. And this year is supposed to be the clean, new starting experience. Injury. Here we go. Played well last week. Apparently came out of it healthy. Now you're going at Baltimore, division rival. This is the time. With Lamar on the other side doing his job, you got to do your job. It's been a weird warm-up where it's had ups and downs and injuries and off the field and all that. This is purely a football conversation. Go beat the Ravens. That is a signature win as a Cleveland Brown for Deshaun Watson. If you beat Baltimore and come out at 6-3 with that defense, then we're like, can they beat the Chiefs? Can they beat everybody in the AFC? It's a huge day for, I think it's his biggest start by far as a Brown in the very short time he's been there. If he shows us something, if he gives us the good Deshaun Watson, like the Browns can do it all this year.
Trevor, the way he lays that out, I can't argue with anything. I think it is a huge game for Deshaun Watson. You go out and you win this. These are the kind of games you go and get Deshaun Watson to win for you.
Yeah, and I agree completely. This is the most important Deshaun Watson game that he has had since he has come to Cleveland. Now, it's not like this will be the only one. There will be others, especially getting to the playoffs like they hope, making deep playoff runs. Obviously, those games are paramount as well. But up to this point, Kyle hit the nail on the head. Last year was a roller coaster of a season. This was supposed to be okay. A lot of that stuff is, you're starting with a clean slate. He has the injuries and everything like that. And you go out and you trade for and you sign a guy like Deshaun Watson to that massive contract to win these games. Of course, it's easier said than done. It's difficult. You're going into Baltimore. They're a fantastic team this season. It's a divisional opponent. Like, all of that stuff is going against you, but you bring in and you pay a quarterback like this to win these games, to give yourselves a chance to win these games, right? This is not like yeah, but it was in Baltimore, or like, yeah, but the Ravens are real good this year. No, you have put your money where your mouth was, essentially, in this situation, and this would be a massive win for him if he gets this. I agree completely with Kyle.
Yeah, and it's not like he has to, I'm not saying he has to throw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. He has to make the big plays that enable them to win the game. When the game is on the line, if you need to make... Give me the touchdown pass or the long pass to Amari Cooper that sets up the go-ahead touchdown that wins the game. That's what I mean by winning the game for them.
Yeah, I would agree completely. Yeah, it doesn't. Winning the game it's not a benchmark of production. Like, it's not, okay, well, that looks like 300 yards. Now, obviously, if he plays very well and they still don't win the game, it's not like that's all for naught. You can say, wow, look, he played really well in a very important game. That's a building block moving forward. But you're right. I mean, you want him to show up in those big moments. And ultimately, you'd like that to come away with a victory. But it needs to be a big-time performance for him, and I would say his best that he has seen since he's been in Cleveland.
Kevin Stefanski talked about Elijah Moore's role in this offense as kind of that second option to Amari Cooper.
Our pass game, we want to lean on, like you mentioned, Amari, Dave, Elijah. I think those things come in bunches. He's doing a great job. He's doing what he's asked to do. I think he's a threat with the ball in his hands. So those are all things that will continue to grow over the course of the season.
Trevor, is it a factor of they've started P.J. Walker for a few games, Deshaun Watson at less than 100% for a couple of games, DTR? There hasn't been a flow with really any of the receivers other than Amari Cooper.
Yeah, it's kind of strange because you bring in Elijah Moore to be that kind of presence no matter who the quarterback is, right? When you think about his success with the New York Jets, it was when he was more of a quick hit, kind of middle of the field wide receiver, where not that he wasn't used deep in a lot of deep targets. I mean, there's certainly instances where he was that, but he was that kind of security blanket over the middle type of wide receiver. And you would think that amongst a quarterback carousel, he would actually be the player who, I don't want to say shine the most over Cooper, because Cooper's going to always be the wide receiver one, but I would have thought his production would be better. And I haven't watched every single snap of him this year, but when he was playing really well in New York, I felt like it was an over the middle type of target. Whether it was curl routes, whether it was drag routes that didn't have a lot of depth to them, whether it was just him finding a soft spot in the zone, whatever it was something between the hash marks where a quarterback could say, all right, I got a primary read here. Okay, that's covered really well. Where's Elijah? And I thought that was going to be the role that he had for Cleveland. And maybe that is what they are designing for him. It's just not kind of manifesting into a lot of production right now. But to me, that's when he was most successful in New York. And I think that is how you're going to get the most success out of him in Cleveland as well.
All right, before we go to break, let me ask you this. You know that you're not going to have Jedrick Wills. You're certainly not going to have Jack Conklin, both on IR. You may not have DeJuan Jones. So you're probably going to have James Hudson, and you may have a guy that has been in your facility for a week or two that you signed to the practice squad that you elevated. How do you design an offense against the Ravens? What kind of things do you try to do against a really good defense?
It's tough because I think that my first answer would be, okay, you want to go to quick game, right? You want to make things pretty easy for the offensive line. You want to get the ball out of your hand as much as possible. But the Ravens, they'll play aggressive coverage like we talked about earlier in the show. And then a bigger problem is you got a guy like Roquan Smith, patrolling over the middle. And he is just fantastic at that. He's very reliable in coverage in those short areas, especially between the tackles. And like when you're playing a lot of quick game, you're trying to use those mesh concepts, those drag routes, the quick slants, like all those things that are more in-breaking routes that Roquan can then have an effect on. So it does make it really difficult given the type of defense that they're going up against. But I think that's what you still probably have to try to do, because if you try to hold on to the ball a while, if you try to develop a more vertical offense, you are really hanging your offensive tackles out to dry. And even if DeJuan Jones plays in this game, if he is not able to participate in practice over the first couple of days of this week, that injury is probably something that's going to be bothering him on game day. So he might not be 100%. So I just think the average depth of target for the throws has got to be a little bit less. You got to get more yards after catch out of those receivers. You've got to allow them to become those playmakers, and they have to be those playmakers once the ball gets in their hands.
Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus and I are going to step aside, take another timeout, other side of the break. We'll head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. Sports for CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Trevor Sikkema from Pro Football Focus. He is the co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange podcast as well. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave. Great show every day. Love it. This is Al from Cleveland. I love the way Deshaun Watson is playing now. He can only get better and better. And if the Browns can beat the 49ers without a quarterback, they can beat anybody with Deshaun Watson. I got one quick concern about Deshaun Watson. He's doing great. He can only get better, but the way he carries the ball still, carries it like a loaf of bread when he runs. I just hope somebody tells him, protect that ball. Go Browns.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Trevor, I think we talked about it a little bit earlier. I want him to dump it off more, too. Get out of bounds. I don't want him to take, when you're running, run to the sidelines. I know it's not always possible, but it is possible. Don't look for contact unless it's third down and you're trying to get a first.
Yeah, and he took quite the hit last week, too, to that throwing shoulder side. And it was like, oh, okay, all right, I guess we're doing that today. But, I mean, he looked fine after that, which is obviously a good sign if you're a Browns fan. But, no, of course, I think Deshaun has a little bit of mobility to him, but I don't think he's this major rushing threat, right? I think that you would say that the ball is better in the hands of a different playmaker. And so if you have the opportunity to dump the ball off to, like you said, one of those running backs, and they've had success with that recently, I think that you kind of gravitate towards that. You give him those opportunities to have flowing wide receivers or running backs or tight ends, whatever it is, to the side in which he might scramble or which you might have the most space, the field side, if you will. And so I think that that's something that you can try to keep in mind as much as possible. But yeah, certainly coming off an injury where he's had to miss time, you don't want your quarterback taking any unnecessary hits like that.
So this is from Pro Football Talk, their midseason awards. The MVP, they have Lamar Jackson. He's completed a career-high 71.5% of his passes, still a threat as a runner, orchestrating brand-new offense to perfection. I was one of the guys that was really skeptical of what that offense was going to look like. I'm not skeptical when they keep hanging 35 on really good teams.
I got to cover the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for a handful of years as a beat reporter before I was at Pro Football Focus. And that was during the Dirk Cutter era of that team. And their offensive coordinator at that time was Todd Monken. And so I got to cover Todd Monken very closely. We got to talk to him as the offensive coordinator of the team. And I always loved his approach. I mean, he was very straightforward. There was no BS to what he was doing. I loved how innovative he was for the offense. He was the head coach for the Oklahoma State Cowboys when they were putting up record numbers earlier in the 2010s. And so everywhere this guy has been, he's figured it out. Last 2 years, he was at Georgia for that national championship team, putting on a show, making the most of Stetson Bennett. And so I was not worried at all about him producing with that Baltimore Ravens offense. And the fact that he's getting to work with Lamar is actually something that I was really, really excited about. Now, the receivers aren't playing as well as I thought they were. They're having to lean on Zay Flowers a lot more than I anticipated, but they're still making it work. And the reason why they are is because of Lamar Jackson. A lot of people thought that, hey, wow, great athlete at quarterback. That's incredible. But Lamar is also incredibly smart. He sees the game so well, and you are seeing that this year with how efficient he is and how he passes the football. And so that I would agree. I think that he's either at the top or in the conversation for MVP this season.
So they're currently third, Baltimore, currently third in the league in the rushing, 4.8 yards a carry. And they've run for at least 130 yards the past 4 weeks. They've got a number of different guys. It's they lost. Remember, they lost J.K. Dobbins. They lost their number one running back very early in the year. What's making this run game go?
It's pretty simple, but it is their offensive line. It's a veteran group. It's got Ronnie Stanley, Morgan Moses, John Simpson, Kevin Zeitler, Tyler Linderbaum now in his second year. But it's a lot of veteran guys, and they're playing very, very well together. They're keeping things very diverse in their rushing attack. It's a lot of outside zone, a lot of inside zone, but also a lot of man blocking concepts, duo, a lot of power concepts like counter. Like they're just doing a lot of different things in their run game. When you look at yards before contact for their running backs, they're number one in the NFL. They're number one in total yards before contact, and they are number one in yards before contact per average. And so that just shows how much they are winning up front. They've got great athletes. Of course, Lamar's a great athlete. We saw Keaton Mitchell and what he was able to do last week as a great athlete in the backfield as well. Gus Edwards is an experienced running back who's now back in that backfield. And so they've got good players, but it is that offensive line that is leading to those statistics of how successful they have been in the run game this year.
And that's, if Browns fans are looking for good news, the Browns defensive line is a strength. So it's going to be a battle of strength on strength up front for that run game. All right, what are some of the matchups you think that will decide this Browns-Ravens matchup in Baltimore?
Yeah, no, I mean, one of them is kind of what I just said. It's going to be the Browns' run defense unit against the Ravens' offensive line. It's going to be huge. I think it's going to be the matchup that absolutely determines this game, because if you can stifle the Ravens' rushing attack, yes, Lamar has been fantastic as a passer, but like I said, the receivers aren't world beaters here. So again, that gives you a recipe to where, okay, maybe they score 20, 21 points, but you can outscore 21, 20 points. So winning up front, mitigating how successful they are in the run game, that's going to be huge. And then the other one I mentioned earlier in the show, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah versus Lamar Jackson. How well can he spy him? How well can he get him on the ground once he starts to scramble? Can he even get him into the backfield? Can you not have those missed tackles? To me, that is absolutely paramount to their success. And I think it's going to be a great matchup. I really do.
When you look at this formula for a win for the Browns, how do they – I don't think they're going to be able to put up 28, 31 points with what they're going to have offensively. I could be wrong, but how do you draw up a win if you're looking at it for the Browns?
It's got to be Deshaun Watson's best game. I know that it's kind of a cliche, but somebody's got to step up at wide receiver, and it's got to be his best game yet. You know, he's got to come up big in the big moments. Last week, I thought the velocity and the distance on how he was able to throw the ball was good, but you could tell the throwing motion wasn't exactly what it had been in the past. You could tell that he is still coming off of an injury. Getting more healthy, getting that more on schedule to what we're used to seeing will allow him to have those big plays. And you mentioned it's going to be how they mitigate those offensive line injuries, and those playmakers are going to have to be the players who show up. So Deshaun's got to have his best game, but those receivers, they kind of have to have their best game too if they're going to outscore this Ravens team.
The other thing is, last week was the first game, and it was game 8. First game where they didn't turn the ball over. This is definitely an offense you do not give short fields to with Lamar Jackson.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. Turnovers, as every coach will tell you, are where the coaching points start. How do we get a victory? It's winning the turnover battle first and foremost.
Yeah, and really the Browns weren't able to do that. They've won 2 of them, and somehow they're 5-3, which that goes to show you just how good that defense has been.
Yeah, no, that's true. They have been holding teams to very low numbers, and one of the only teams who has been holding teams to lower is the Ravens. So, man, this is 2 teams who they're scoring a lot of points when things are on script, and they're holding teams to very little. And so these are 2 of the best teams in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. It's what's going to make it a must-watch matchup this weekend.
Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus. As always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Trevor.
Appreciate it, guys. Anytime.
Trevor Sikkema, make sure you check him out. He is Pro Football Focus NFL and draft analyst. He also co-hosts the NFL Stock Exchange podcast. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. We continue talking Browns. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Straight ahead. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
This is the 50, 100, 500 scratch-off from the Ohio Lottery, a much cleaner way of winning. We precision-crafted 3 perfect increments of cash, $50, $100, and $500, and created the only game that pays exclusively in those increments, hence the clever name. 50, 100, 500. Ideal quantities for dining foods, clothing wear, or stereophonics. The simplicity is breathtaking. Play 50, 100, 500, and transform how you feel about winning.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, guys. This is James from Stone Mountain, Georgia. I would like to see more of James Prochet. What do you think? I thought he did a pretty good job.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Let's welcome in Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, I thought there was a noticeable difference that you haven't seen from a punt returner in James Prochet in a long time. I mean, it was quick, catch it, and get north and south and get some yardage. And you know what? I'm not opposed to seeing him more in the offense either.
Yeah, I think what he gives you right now, obviously in the punt return game, like you said, a quick burst guy, and it was good for the Browns to see, a guy like Prochet just take the ball right up the field, just get a handful of yards. Every yard you get on a punt return is really good. If you can get 10 yards on a punt return, that's sensational in the NFL. But when you look at James Prochet, really never really did much as a Raven, even looking at his stats right now, played 43 games with the Ravens, and in spite of their issues throwing the ball the last couple of seasons, he has just 25 catches for 278 yards. So not a lot of productivity as a receiver. So I think maybe if you're really struggling to try and find, help elsewhere, then yeah, I would look into it. But right now for me at receiver, they've got to find ways to get more out of Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman.
So I know you wrote an article. Is Kevin Stefanski the most underrated coach in football? Take us through that, what you found out, and your thoughts on it.
I said that was fiction because I feel like, I don't know if we can call him underrated anymore. I mean, when you're a coach that wins Coach of the Year in 2020, wins a playoff game in your first season, and when you navigate the waters that Stefanski has had to navigate the last 2 seasons to keep this team, kind of where it is, especially this year with no Nick Chubb since week 2. Deshaun Watson has only played 1 game and about 5 passes since week 3 when he suffered that rotator cuff strain. The fact that this team is 5-3, all things considered, tells you Stefanski is I would say, in that second tier of coaching. He's not a Mike Tomlin. He's not an Andy Reid. He's not Kyle Shanahan. But what he is I think he's not underrated. I think he's just a really good coach. Maybe he needs to get a little more credit than I think, some people out there kind of thinking. Obviously part of it is just because he hadn't had good quarterback play, but the fact that that the Browns have avoided losing streaks this season in spite of all the issues they've had with injuries, particularly at quarterback, like I said, with Deshaun Watson missing time, they went 2-1 with PJ Walker starting twice, playing the vast majority of snaps in the third. To do that with a quarterback who had 1 touchdown to 5 interceptions in those 3 games, that's an incredible job of Stefanski. And I think we can't just call him underrated. We have to call him, kind of what he is, just an above average head coach.
So this is kind of interesting as well. So 4 teams have 500-plus yards by running backs without their leading rusher. The Dolphins, 638, Lions, 582, the Bears, 547, and the Browns at 518. Now, I wonder how many of those other teams, the Dolphins, Lions, and Bears, also haven't had one of their starting tackles and their starting quarterback for a number of those games.
Yeah, and even looking at the numbers since the bye week, the Browns have had 100-plus rushing yards in all 4 games since the bye. In fact, in the 3 games that PJ Walker was starting quarterback, 150-plus yards in all 3 games. They ran for 160 against the 49ers, and we all know how great that San Francisco defense is. So Kevin Stefanski, going back to what I was saying earlier, that, he's an above-average coach. What he's done is he's found a way to get this run game going without Nick Chubb, with kind of the sum of the parts that he has with Jerome Ford, Pierre Strong, Kareem Hunt, who, by the way, has looked better, I think, this year than he did in most of last season in kind of this new power back role that it seems like he's playing. The fact that they've been able to manufacture this run game has really kept this team afloat while waiting for its quarterback to get healthy. And now that Deshaun Watson's got a game under his belt, he looks healthier. Gonna get healthier, you would imagine, as time goes on, the further he gets away from the initial rotator cuff strain. We already saw him air out a couple deep balls. You would think as he continues to do that, it loosens up that box a little more, and it just makes it easier for the Browns to continue to do what they've done well under Stefanski for the past 4 years, and that's run the football.
So Kevin Stefanski was asked today if the mistakes that the Browns made against the Ravens the first time they played are easily correctable.
Going back to that one, there's always corrections. Sometimes it's assignment. Sometimes it can be simple alignment. It can be technique. You give them credit. They had some good run types, and we can do a better job, second time around.
One of the goals your team had was win the division. Do you feel it's on the line of this game?
Yeah, I mean, every team wants to win the division. We're focused on this game this week, really. Want to win this game this week.
And in order to stay alive in the division, they really do the division race. they do have to beat the Ravens. You lose to the Ravens, and Ravens are threatening to run away with the AFC North.
Yeah, I mean, I still think this division is going to be incredibly tight. Don't forget, after this game, the Ravens still have to play the Bengals on Thursday night, so that's not going to be any small feat, especially the way Cincinnati's playing. But going back to what Kevin Stefanski was talking about with those mistakes, I think a big part of the mistakes they made was the fact that, again, they didn't know they weren't going to have Deshaun Watson until a couple hours before kickoff. And we saw against the Cardinals, what happens when you throw a fifth-round rookie quarterback out there against an elite defense. You almost have no shot. And that's kind of the way it looks when you look back on that game in hindsight. They had no shot with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Again, that's not meant to be a knock on DTR, but just that was an extremely tough assignment going into his first game. And the Ravens did what good teams are supposed to do to rookie quarterbacks. They're supposed to make them look like rookies, turn the ball over, and then on the offensive side of the ball, you build a big enough lead where it really makes it impossible. But now with Deshaun Watson being back on the field, should be able to go on Sunday. I think it's a different approach because as a defense, now you're not thinking, oh, we have to absolutely shut these guys down. We have to hold them to, 14 or fewer points, or we have no chance. Now you can play a little more relaxed, not thinking you have to be Superman and save the day because, on offense, you have the talent to at least potentially keep up with Baltimore. I know the Ravens defense has been outstanding this season. I've said before, I think they're better than the sum of their parts as they've shown all season. But now with a better quarterback, you at the very minimum have a puncher's chance in this game.
Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com, and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we'll hear what former NFL defensive lineman Gerald McCoy thinks the Browns need to do against the Ravens. Sports for CLE, be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. Gerald McCoy, a former NFL defensive lineman, on the Browns-Ravens matchup and what he thinks the Browns need to do to win this one.
Both teams have really, really good defenses, but I'm going to talk about Cleveland's offense. Okay. Deshaun Watson got back on track last week. He had a really good game, but I need to see more of them pushing the ball downfield. They can run the ball. We've seen they run the ball at average 144 yards a game, but they have some speedsters on offense that they're not even trying to use. They have the 8th fewest pass yards per attempt right now, and they have a bona fide number one in Amari Cooper. A lot of people are saying, oh, the Cowboys made a mistake getting rid of Amari Cooper. Well, Cleveland, if the Cowboys made a mistake and now you have him, use him. The Deshaun Watson, Amari Cooper connection has to be big on Sunday. And they need to attempt to push the ball down the field. We know you can run the ball, but you got to test his defenses. Great defenses, a lot of people are afraid to test them. Forget all that. You're trying to take over the division. Test his defense, push the ball downfield. You have defenders. Take some chances. If you got Deshaun Watson, you paid him all this money, use him.
Tim, I don't disagree with the idea of throwing the ball downfield unless you're potentially playing with your 4th and 5th tackles. You know Jedrick Wills is on an IR. You know Conklin's been on IR. DeJuan Jones didn't practice. That means you're looking at James Hudson and Jerron Williams, who was just on the practice squad, potentially as your tackles. I don't know if you're going to be able to take too many shots downfield with your tackles being your 4th and 5th tackles.
Yeah, that's where I It comes down to, creativity from Kevin Stefanski. We saw it 2 weeks ago against the Seahawks, how great of a job, Stefanski did setting up some screens and, the big gains they had. Pierre Strong had about a 40-some-yard reception on one of those screens. David Njoku had a touchdown off one of those. It's going to be a matter of, how do you take what Baltimore does well and find a way to neutralize it? And the other thing I would look at with this passing game is I would imagine, they'll still try deep shots to Amari Cooper, but I wonder how much they're going to shade the coverage towards Amari Cooper, because lately it seems like he's the only guy that's really getting the football on a consistent basis outside of David Njoku. And maybe the Ravens game plan is dare anybody else on the Browns receiving corps to beat you, because right now Elijah Moore just hadn't had that big performance. Cedric Tillman has just 2 catches in his entire NFL career, finally getting a chance. Maybe when they look at the game plan, they say, we're going to try and make those 2 guys beat us. And if they do, hats off, good job, But I feel like more than anything with the deep ball is the Browns have to be able to spread around. They have to get other guys involved in the passing game and not just continually lean on Cooper and Njoku, because no matter how good you are, defenses will try to take them away, and especially the way Cooper's been playing the last handful of weeks. So I would imagine this is a game where the other receivers really have to step up.
So on the other side of the ball, it's Lamar Jackson. Anthony Walker talked about Lamar Jackson, the Ravens offense, and what the Browns need to do better than they did in that first game.
He's always been a good passer. Y'all not going to get me. He's always been a good passer. Obviously, being a dual-threat quarterback, he's been able to use his feet when he needs to, get out the pocket, make some big plays, throwing on the run and all that stuff. So he's always been a great quarterback to me. I'm biased. I'm from, same area, so he's always been a good quarterback. Being able to make every throw, and then being able to use his feet to be a dual threat quarterback.
The way they spread out, their format, they use a lot of 3 receivers under this coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of loosens up the tackle box. Is that one of the reasons the running game is so effective?
Yeah, for sure. When you're able to have some dynamic receivers outside, that kind of you got to put your attention to a little bit more. Like you said, lightens up the box. And that's a huge part of their success. You're able to outnumber in the run game, and always when you add Lamar, that's playing 11-on-11 football. So that makes it a little tougher to defend.
When you look at the film of that first game, are they easy corrections to make as you prepare to meet them again?
We just got to execute better, whether it's corrections or, just being, like I said, fundamentally sound and doing what we do better. That's just what it has to be. We got to do a much better job this game than we did the first game.
Tim, I think at the end there what he's saying is the Browns defense just didn't play well. And I can't necessarily argue with that. They didn't give up a lot of yardage against the Ravens. Gave up 2 long drives, 2 short fields. But the bars, it's a different grading scale for this defense. That we expect more out of them because, quite frankly, they've been pretty good.
I do want to give Lamar Jackson a lot of credit. I thought, in that Week 4 game, he was sensational. Some of the throws he had, including, I think it was that touchdown, I believe it was to Mark Andrews at the end of the first half. That's a world-class throw. Sometimes, again, guys just beat you, and I feel like in that game, Lamar Jackson simply just beat the Browns in that game. So I think with this rematch, I would imagine, there's got to be a little more emphasis for the Browns on winning that line of scrimmage defensively, because when you talk about lighter boxes, 3 receivers, 4 receivers, and then running in the middle of that, it still comes down to, can you neutralize that offensive line with your defensive front? And obviously the Browns, they're getting great play out of that defensive tackle position. Dalvin Tomlinson had that amazing game against the Cardinals. Jordan Elliott seems like he's having quite the year in the contract year. Shelby Harris has been quite the addition to the interior. They're getting the play I think you want out of the interior of that defensive line, but this is the time to turn it loose and for those guys to, absolutely dominate, because as Trevor Sikkema you had on earlier was talking about, just the way that Ravens offensive line plays, you have to try and make that at best, at worst, a neutral, so that they're not dominant, because it felt like in that first game Baltimore's offensive line was just having its way with Cleveland's defensive front.
So this is from ESPN, mid-season report for each team. For the Browns, their football power index rank is 12. Chances of making the playoffs, 54.6%. What we know, Browns have an elite defense. Cleveland number 2 in the league, defensive efficiency led by Myles Garrett. Coverage has been just as tenacious as Garrett, spearheaded by one of the league's top cornerback tandems, Denzel Ward and Martin Emerson. What we don't know, if Deshaun Watson can be franchise quarterback that propels Cleveland to a deep playoff run, made some nice throws in Sunday's win over the Cardinals. Where he goes from here will decide Cleveland's ultimate fate this season and beyond. And again, I think it's fair. I don't think, again, they don't need Deshaun Watson to throw for 400 yards, 350 yards. With a defense like this, he needs to make the 3 or 4 big plays that will ultimately decide this game. You mentioned the first game. Fumble that was returned, or interception that was returned to the 10-yard line, touchdown pass to Mark Andrews, where he went up and out, jumped 2 defenders. Those two plays kind of swung the game to the Ravens. There's going to be 2 or 3 plays. If Deshaun Watson makes them, that's what elite quarterbacks do.
2021 game in Baltimore between the two teams. I mean, both quarterbacks were awful in that game. I mean, they kept turning the ball over. But the play that won the game was Lamar Jackson had this crazy scramble drill. I think he was like about 20, 25 yards behind the line of scrimmage and somehow threw a touchdown pass to Mark Andrews. And that was, the pivotal play in the game. So it's about those splash plays. And I think what helps the Browns is that Deshaun Watson comes into this, playing probably his 2 best games as a member of the Browns. I'm kind of throwing that Colts game out because he wasn't healthy and ready to go. But the Titans game was easily the best one he's played. The Cardinals one on Sunday, I thought was his second best. Still kind of a clear margin between 1 and 2 as far as the quality games he played. So I'd say when it comes to that, he's in pretty good form. The fact that, the deep ball looked really good on Sunday against the Cardinals is promising. Just needs to continue to work on the mechanics and the footwork in the short passing game. But it's clear that, that's going to be important is they got to hit those short passes early to kind of loosen up that Baltimore defense. And then when you have Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, David Njoku, guys who have the speed to win those battles, you have to take your shots and you have to be able to hit them because those high leverage splash plays, we've seen it with the Pittsburgh Steelers for what feels like forever. Their winning formula is those splash plays. If you hit them, especially with your quarterback, who seems like he's starting to find himself a little bit, based on the last 2 games he started and played in the fourth quarter, you feel like you're in a good position. It just comes down to hitting those plays when you need them.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take one more timeout. Other side of the break, we'll hear from Deshaun Watson. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
This is the 50, 100, 500 scratch-off from the Ohio Lottery. A much cleaner way of winning. We precision-crafted 3 perfect increments of cash, $50, $100, and $500, and created the only game that pays exclusively in those increments. Hence the clever name. 50, 100, 500. Ideal quantities for dining foods, clothing wear, or stereophonics. The simplicity is breathtaking. Play 50, 100, 500 and transform how you feel about winning.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Deshaun Watson talked about what he has seen as he goes through and starts to study up on this Ravens defense.
They're very talented. I mean, they know exactly what they want to do. A lot of guys played a lot of football, very depth, a lot of depth in their defense, and they make you earn everything. So, they coach very well, very great players, and you got to go out there and try to deserve each and every yard. Starting up front, they're disruptive up front. They make the quarterback hold it and make decisions that, the quarterback probably didn't want to, or it's overthrows, and they're doing a good job in the secondary of capitalizing on that. So we got to give them credit for doing that, and they've been doing that, very, very well. So we got to make sure that we, stay locked in on our P's and Q's and make sure that the ball is getting into our receivers' hands and not the other side.
Yeah, and Tim, last game against Cardinals, first one all year where the Browns didn't turn the ball over. They need to string a couple of those together if they're going to climb up in the standings.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that, they've lost the turnover battle 6 of the 8 games. And in those 6 games, they're 500. And 8 games in a season, they're a 5-3 football team. And Sunday was the first time they didn't turn the ball over. So that is kind of remarkable. But what I think about when I look at this game, what I think one thing the Browns need to do, they need to win first down pretty consistently. Great defenses like Baltimore, the last thing you want to do with how strong they are, it feels like across the board. The defensive line is strong. Their linebacker is very good, particularly Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen in the middle. The safety position is just sensational with Kyle Hamlin, Marcus Williams, Geno Stone, who we'll talk about probably in a little bit. I mean, they got great players across the board, so you've got to avoid negative situations. You can't be in 3rd and longs. You can't, lose 4 yards on first down. You got to stay ahead of the sticks, even if and you can't have those 15-play drives. You got to win first down. You got to be able to hit those explosive plays, and you simply have to find ways to win one-on-one battles. It's a hard ask because this Baltimore defense is sensational, but I think it starts with avoiding putting yourself in a bad position as often as possible. You do that, you're successful on early downs. It's a recipe for success against pretty much any defense.
All right, so you wrote an article, 3 things that you know about the Ravens. 1, they may be the hottest team in football right now. 2, Baltimore much healthier than it was in Week 4 when the Browns played them. And 3, Geno Stone blossoming into an elite ball hawk. So take us through those.
Well, let's start with number 1. They're, like I said, they're probably the hottest team in football. You look at the 4 games, the 4-game winning streak they're on. They've outscored their opponents in those games 130-49, and it's not like they're playing a bunch of last place teams. Their 2 biggest wins came at home against the Lions and Seahawks, 2 teams who should definitely be playoff teams in the NFC, and the Ravens just destroyed them. And you look at it right now, Lamar Jackson is having an outstanding season, a career high in completion percentage. The run game is as dangerous as it's been even without J.K. Dobbins. Right now, Baltimore's just playing outstanding football. The only question is, in the NFL, how long can you sustain all that? We'll see what happens. So number 2, like I say, Baltimore definitely is a much healthier position than they were in Week 4. Even looking at the injury report today, if you look at the injury report for these 2 teams, the Browns, they have so many guys on it, so many guys that didn't practice. For Baltimore, only 2 guys didn't practice. Odell Beckham Jr. Didn't practice. Michael Pierce, the nose tackle, had an illness. He didn't practice. Morgan Moses, full practice with a shoulder issue. Baltimore's healthy, by and large healthy, so much healthier than they were at the beginning of the season. When there were questions who's going to be able to play, they look close to full strength right now, and it makes sense why, they're starting to get hot is guys have been back. And number 3, Geno Stone, the safety, is the NFL leader in interceptions. He now has 6 on the season. He picked off Geno Smith on Sunday to push himself further in that lead. I talked about those safeties, Marcus Williams, Kyle Hamilton. They're both very good. Geno Stone's underrated. I don't think he's underrated anymore, and you really can't be when you're leading the NFL interceptions. So that safety position for Baltimore, very dangerous. Stone's a guy you got to know where he is, and you got to be careful when you're testing him.
So before I let you go, let me ask you this. Matchups that decide this game, and what is the formula for a Browns win?
I'm going to go old school with the matchups. I think it's the lines, how they play in that game, because I feel like in addition to, the mismatch the Browns had at quarterback, I just thought, both lines did not fare well in that game. Baltimore's offensive line gave Lamar Jackson all kinds of time to throw, and there was all the talk about how dominant the Browns defensive line had been again after quarterback. They just couldn't get to Lamar Jackson consistently and create a lot of pressure. I know they got a couple sacks on him, but, just not enough able to generate consistent pressure and not being able to slow down the running game. So they got to be able to control that. On the other side of the ball, again, they're probably going to have to start, James Hudson. They're going to definitely start James Hudson. If DeJuan Jones is healthy, he's going to go. Kevin Stefanski not committing who's being the left tackle just yet because you don't know what DeJuan's status is going to be like for Sunday. They got to find a way to hold up, especially in the running game. One of the best ways to hold back a great pass rush is to run right at them. And I know Kevin Stefanski's done a good job of, trying to stick with the running game, and it's pretty much paid off. They got to keep doing it. And the formula for success, I think, is kind of what we touched on earlier. Protect the football, no turnovers. And I would imagine Kevin Stefanski and Deshaun Watson would probably go with a similar game plan like they had against the Titans and Cardinals. Start them off with some short passes, get him into a flow early, and then, get aggressive and take your shots and go after this Ravens defense, and don't be afraid of the moment. This is what you bring in Deshaun Watson for. This is what you traded 6 draft picks, 3 first rounders for, paid him $230 million. This is finally the first real time we've seen him in a game with actual consequence, where a win really puts you in the position to win the AFC North. A loss is not the end of the world, because they could turn around and beat Pittsburgh next week and still be fine for a playoff spot. But if you win in Baltimore, all of a sudden the AFC North is right there for you to take. And Deshaun Watson doesn't need to be Superman, but I think he needs to play well, at least, to give you a shot. If he plays elite football, they have a pretty good chance to get out of Baltimore with a win, because if Watson plays at that elite level, we remember how good of a quarterback he was in Houston.
Tim Bielik, Plain Dealer and cleveland.com. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
All right, Tim Bielik, make sure you check him out. So really good stuff. Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.